party's first gathering since its heavy defeat in last year's general election. Also, the first to be addressed by Brendan Howlin since he took over as party leader. As you join us, he's about to be welcomed to the platform by Dublin City Councillor Rebecca Moynihan.
I was only a toddler when the man that I'm about to introduce entered the Oireachtas. I was that same toddler when he joined his Labour colleagues in voting against the 8th Amendment, something which affects me as a woman today. It was a time when voting against the 8th Amendment was neither profitable nor popular. It was this same man, as Minister for Health, who made contraceptives available for all of us in this room. It was that same man who proposed the first civil partnership legislation which led to the road of marriage equality, which meant that people in this room could marry people that they loved. He was the first man to put the issue of Garda reform on the table and was brought to the courts for this trouble. When we talk about reform, when we talk about delivery, nothing defines that Labour spirit more than the leader that we have today, a champion of reform for his whole political life. He is a man who has served leaders of this party loyally to the best of his ability each time. A man who, even on our worst day, topped the poll here in Wexford in his hometown. Comrades, I'm honoured and proud to introduce a Labour man for his whole life and somebody who is now leader of this great party. I invite you to stand up and give a round of applause, Brendan Howlin TD.
Brendan Howlin entering the hall on what is a special occasion for two reasons: making his first conference speech as leader of the party, and, as Rebecca Moynihan said, making it in his hometown of Wexford. The general election left Labour with just 7 seats in Dáil Éireann, and support for the party is averaging even lower. So this is an important speech in several ways.
Thank you, Rebecca. I introduced Eamon Gilmore as leader of the party in this room 10 years ago. So you never know, Rebecca. Fáilte roimh ilig go lach arman. Seasan party nach daibre trí von físaval. Dénacht, cearta agus cóthionachas. Galam díobh se nacht, go mbeadh an party seo ag díreadh go hiomlán go níd seo a chur chun críoch do winter na hÉireann. Welcome to Wexford. There is no place that I'd rather be. It's been my home all my life. I was born 10 minutes from here in the Fight, and I went to the Fight school. Some years after that, I returned to the Fight as a teacher. This town made me the person that I am. And it was here too that I learned my politics. My father, John Howlin, was a trade unionist known to many of the people in this room, a Labour man to the core. My mother, Molly, she too had very strong views. They'd sit at the kitchen table and talk about politics and local issues. As a young man, I watched, I listened, I soaked it all up. John Howlin had a desire to help people and a profound belief that this party, Labour, was the vehicle to do just that. I like talking about Wexford. Not because it's special, but obviously, to me, it is. Wexford is typical. Wexford's problems are Westmead's problems, and Wicklow's, and Westport's, and Walkinstown's. The people of this town care. They have ambition for their community, for their country, and above all, for the future. They, like all Irish people, are being let down now by a do-nothing government at a time when the state is needed more now than ever. You know, sometimes it feels like a dark wind is blowing across the world. For many of us on this island, it all seems very strange. And more than a little scary, too. Brexit happened. Trump happened. Tomorrow, the French people are going to the polls against the backdrop of yet another horrific terrorist attack. And Le Pen might yet happen. People are voting, in large part, out of fear and out of hurt. There are many people, too many, happy to prey on these fears. And they're not restricted to the United States, or to Britain, or to France. We have our own. Less extreme, perhaps, but hurlers on the ditch nonetheless, who will say anything to make people afraid, whose solutions would only make things worse. A year ago, people thought that changing the government would make things better, and they voted for change. They believed that politicians who agreed with every person on every doorstep, on every issue, would deliver that change. They won't. Charlatans and conservatives never have. The slogans they spout are not simple truths. They're falsehoods, because complex questions don't have simple answers. If all this is true, and I believe it to be, then Labour must step up. As a Social Democratic Party, fear and hurt are not what we do. Hope is what we do. It requires optimism, certainly, but it requires determination too. And we are ready to put our shoulders to the wheel. For many generations, there's been a social contract. That contract meant that every family could believe in one simple idea. Work hard, and your children will have a better life than you do. Work hard, and the future will be better. That was a fair deal. But for the first time in generations, people no longer believe that to be true. They feel afraid for their children. They worry they'll have to emigrate, that they won't be able to afford a home. Young people in their 20s wonder, will they have any job security, or a decent quality of life, or a health system that works, or a roof over their head? It's our job to change that, because for Labour, hope is what we do. Hope. Hope to take the challenges face on. Brexit, whether we like it or not, is happening. Most of us here in Ireland think Europe has been good for us. Not perfect, but good. Membership of the European Union helped us to change, and to change for the better. The UK has received much of the same advantages that we have. Improvements to workers' rights, environmental protections, opportunities for students and for researchers. Europe has delivered on all of these things and more. And yet, the British people voted, in part out of fear, in part out of hurt, for Brexit. An action that will have massive implications for their future, and also for ours. Responding to Brexit is our greatest national challenge. And that's why Labour has published 20 detailed proposals, actions that can be taken to protect us from the fallout from Brexit. An early warning system to help support sectors that truly face a hammering. a Brexit trade adjustment fund to step in and help those particular sectors, a ramping up of capital investment. All of these things could be done, and it could be done now. Brexit has undermined devolved government, particularly in Northern Ireland. Good intentions abound, apparently on every side. Yet the path to a borderless Ireland after Brexit is very far from clear. Made worse by this week's Tory desire for parliamentary domination, a desire that our government is naive enough to see actually as hopeful, as if a large Tory majority was ever good for Ireland. Historically, partition has been bad for both North and South. Instead of living together, we created two narrow sectarian states. Neither has worked as it should. I'd love to see a united Ireland, that is an agreed Ireland, one that unites hearts and minds as much as territory. One that accommodates and celebrates diversity, rather than representing a triumph of one side over another. After Brexit, there is, I believe, a space for a dialogue about this island. We who aspire to a united Ireland need to map out what it might look like. Our task is to prepare an inclusive vision for all of the people on this island, a European Ireland that can signal a brighter future for whatever tradition you have that you live on this island. If we're serious about this, if we think it's more than simply sloganeering, then we need to sit down and talk about it, to think deeply with a completely open mind, and to do so together, before we rush to any border polls or to do any sectarian headcounts. Because so long as we act generously and in each other's interests, then our future, a shared future for all on this island, can be whatever we imagine it to be. Brexit doesn't mean we live in a world without hope. Neither did the election of Donald Trump. I haven't been shy about saying what I think of him. He's a racist, he's a sexist, he's a homophobe. He doesn't have the temperament or patience to run the greatest power on the planet. He's a danger to all of us. He's already raging war on the environment. When he promises to ramp up the burning of coal, he gives false hope to those who have worked for generations in the mines, but he gives real hope to a powerful, dirty industry. Our own government has published a draft climate plan. It is spectacularly lacking. The man who oversees this work has said that the draft plan was a waste of time, and he doesn't believe it can be fixed by the June deadline. But there is so much we can do. Some of it is hard. Reducing emissions while agriculture is thriving will be a huge challenge. Creating a just transition from peat and coal burning stations is tough too. But we should at least be trying. When Dublin Bus say they want to trial electric buses, why don't we just say yes? Why don't we say yes to the expansion of the public bike scheme? Why don't we put solar panels on all schools in the country? Why don't we build wind farms on Bord na Móna lands where there's no controversy? We can and we must do all of this. and much, much more. I believe in the power of the activist state. We need the government, the state, to be the activist of greater power than any one of us as individuals can ever be alone. Some steps we could take quickly, and they would make a difference. Both the Greens and ourselves have published legislation, for example, to ban microbeads. Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil defeated the Green Party bill 5 months ago. They both promised in the defeating of it that they would take action, but of course they've done nothing. So Sean Sherlock will table our bill in the Dáil on the 4th of May, and then we'll find out whether their promises for action mean anything at all. Uncertainty around the future of work is hitting us too. When I'm asked, what's the best thing we did in government? It's what we did in relation to work. Halving unemployment, establishing the Low Pay Commission, raising the minimum wage by €1.50 an hour, collective bargaining. Labour does as Labour is. And it's for that reason that our primary mission as a party is to look at the future of work. Globalisation has changed things. The automation of work will accelerate that too. And only we have the ideas to turn this around. Michael D. Higgins was president of this party. As Uachtaráin na hÉireann, he doesn't belong to us anymore. He belongs to all the people of Ireland. But he still acts as a national conscience. 2 years ago, he reminded us that responding to the needs, the fears, the aspirations of citizens who don't enjoy security of employment is a defining challenge of our times. Insecurity of employment is growing. Casual employment and the gig economy are growing. And the idea of a job for life is gone in most sectors. But we're not powerless in the face of these changes. It is possible to allow freelance workers to come together and negotiate with their bosses because we're legislating now to do exactly that. It is possible to tell the Low Pay Commission to make sure that everybody earns a living wage. We've been calling for that for a long time. It is possible to say that the gender pay gap must be closed, and we are going to legislate to do just that. It is possible to look at a universal basic income, at workplace democracy, at collective bargaining. It is possible to unleash the power of Irish enterprise. All of these things are possible. This government will not do them, but you better believe we will. Anyone who trusts the Conservative parties with this agenda is just naive. Conservatives don't believe in the power of government. We want to see a vibrant state, to harness the power of the state to do public good. That's why we've been calling for additional capital investment, changes to the fiscal rules, and an end to the fallacy of the so-called rainy day fund. €3 billion to be kept in an account instead of being spent on infrastructure. They've announced a review of expenditure, but they've committed no money to it. Instead of creating a worthless rainy day fund, Labour would use that €3 billion to double the available amount, to use that money to build hospitals, to create jobs, to support our communities, and particularly to build local authority houses. While money is cheap, why would we not use it? I think the reason is simple. On the economy, we have a single-party, right-wing Fine Gael government. Even IBEC say the government has an austerity fetish, and they're right. They waste money on tax cuts that people barely notice, but provide little investment in where it's most needed. After everything we've gone through as a people for the last 10 years, we're entitled to better, to decent hospitals, to brilliant schools, to homes we can afford, to transport links that work. Because economic growth is good, but quality of life is what matters. That's why we want to measure progress differently, not based on the size of the economy, but on the strength of our society, the quality of our healthcare, the state of our environment, and the level of equality that we've reached. Now that's something worth fighting for. The Labour Party is not perfect. We have our flaws. But still we know where we stand. We are idealists, and we know how to implement change. During our time in government, we made mistakes. I know that. We all know that. But we achieved a lot. Ireland in 2017 is undeniably a better place than it was in 2011. That we got little credit for that is simply the hard truth of politics. The people of Ireland make the ultimate decision. And they decided we didn't do well enough. The challenge now for Labour is not to fight the last election again, but to listen to the people and to be prepared for the election of tomorrow. We will be honest with the people. We will never stop striving for a better future for our country. That must be the case. Because the challenges we face are great. Brexit, climate change, the future of work, the great causes of insecurity in our age, breeding grounds for fear and hurt if we do nothing. But the bigger the challenge, the greater our determination. Our politics of hope would truly be a new politics. Not the sham of this government, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and a ragbag of independents with no ambition. And they're content with that. Leo and Simon square up against one another, playing to their base, dragging the country further to the right, running an election based on tax cuts and shutting down Bus Éireann, dog whistles to their supporters on the right, pitting the private sector against the public sector once more, while Enda and Micheál are content just to play for time. In June of last year, Jan O'Sullivan first criticised what she coined the do-nothing Dáil. She was making a point about our school's admission bill being kicked down the road, and it's not the only issue that has been treated that way. Movement towards a living wage, repeal of the eighth, and I mean repeal, not replace. Making a joke of our long-term water needs, fudging and failing on Garda reform. All of these issues, and many, many more, have just been kicked down the street. It's not good enough. No movement on a living wage means families stuck struggling to pay their bills and feed their children. No movement on the Eighth Amendment means continuing to ship 12 women every day abroad in harrowing situations. No movement is indefensible, but there are areas where progress has actually stopped. And that is even worse. Labour's plan to expand free GP care to all children seems to be dead in the water. And families watching us now know how difficult it is to get that €50 to get your children to the GP. The funding of free GP care for the under-12s was put in place before we left, but nothing has happened since. Making class sizes smaller has been ditched too. Progress we started in 2015 has stopped. Our children are still in classes of 28, 29 or 30, and that extra few minutes needed by a child who wants particular attention by a teacher is not available. Doing nothing is not something to be proud of. It means that government begins to actually do harm. We saw weeks of industrial action in Bus Éireann, while Lord Ross twiddled his thumbs, sitting in his office. No more selfies on the bus. A Minister for Transport content to do nothing. Concerned about a Garda station in Stepaside, but caring nothing Cork or Limerick or Galway or anywhere else. The dysfunction at the heart of the government helps nobody, and it hurts many. Our people, quite simply, deserve better. People often speak about Ireland as a small country. We're only as small as the limit of our imagination. The best country to be born into, to be educated in, to live in, to grow old in. That's something worth imagining. Last year, we commemorated the 1916 centenary. This year, it is worth casting our minds back to an event that took place 150 years ago. On the eve of the Fenian Rising in 1867, the original proclamation was delivered to the Times newspaper. It asserted that all of us are born equal. It recognized that we come together as communities to protect each other and to share our burdens, and to aim for one simple truth: justice. Justice that would foster equality and not destroy it. 150 years later, that's a message that still rings true, and it sums up Labour, because this is who we are: striving for decency, striving for justice, striving for equality, blind to gender, blind to race, to sexuality, to ability, to age, reaching for something better for all our people, for our climate, for our communities, for our country, and for our future. Go to Mila Magritte.
And delegates rising to their feet, as usual on these occasions, to acknowledge the speech by Brendan Howlin. That ends our live coverage of the Labour Party conference here in Wexford. More on the week in politics at noon tomorrow, including an interview with Brendan Howlin. The news is next on RT1 from Cathal McCready here at the Labour conference in Wexford. Good evening.